If you're listening to this podcast, there's a good chance you love to fish. I love to fish.
I love to fish.
Shags loves to fish, that's for sure. My family's actually out fishing right now. They were waiting for me to get home from work so I could go fishing, but then I said I got to go back to work. So we all love fishing. Sometimes, though, you just need somebody to go fishing with you. And today's guest, a fellow Missourian, believes he has a solution to help you find someone to go fishing with. I'm Brandon Butler.
I'm Nathan Shags McLeod.
And I'm John Bledsoe from Co-Angler.
And welcome to the Drifted Outdoors podcast. Man, Brandon, this is another fun podcast because John and I have a bit of a history because he's an old rock and roller in a very popular local Missouri band who's still out touring, but back in our mutual friend Jeff Bloomer and Adam Voigt and that whole crew of Ghost the Machine and Pierpoint and all the rock stars of the early 2000s throughout the state of Missouri, we actually crossed paths multiple times on a bunch of different shows. Little did I know he was a fisherman. We were
Hey,
too
Shags,
busy.
can you close your blinds?
They are closed. They're just gonna have to wait for the sun to go down.
Okay. Or you'll just look like a zebra in this episode.
Yeah, it's just it. That's what happens when you surprise me with a podcast.
It's Monday at 6.
I need to put a shade on there. Generally, it's spring now, so we're getting a lot more sun than we were shooting during the winter at this time. So
we shall adjust. All right.
I'm excited to talk to him about co-angling and this new app and website that he's got. It's a pretty cool idea.
I just want to shoot down Jeff Bloomer, though, real quick, because John, I guess, had tried to email us through the website and didn't get a response. And then he dropped Jeff Bloomer's name, and we got right back to him. So I want him to know that we would have got back to him anyways. I don't want Bloomer to get all the credit for this.
Well, Brandon's in charge of those emails, so he's the one that ignored you the first time.
I mean, I'm sure you would.
That's
I'm sure
true.
you would have got back to me. It had only been like 4 months, so it's normal turnaround time. You know?
Yeah. 6 months is my window. Yeah. Did I tell people anymore? And I'm dead serious. I say this to people, and part of it is the fun of seeing the expression on their face when they come to realize I mean it. And I'm like, oh no, I quit email. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I don't even try anymore. And they're like, haha. And I'm like, no, seriously, like I quit email. Like the people that want to get a hold of me either text me or call me. And if you're not on the text or call level yet, then purgatory is a long and arduous place to live for emails with me at this point.
Oh, so let's just get into the origin story. How did you come up with this co-angler idea and what is it?
Well, like most of us here in Missouri, we have a strong relationship with the outdoors, and so I grew up in a hunting and fishing family, and so it's just always been something that's been a part of me. But what really happened was I bought a boat. Once I actually bought my first boat, I was kind of exposed to a whole new set of opportunities and challenges, and just as simply as I can say it, I was fishing on my boat by myself. It was actually on Palm de Terre Lake in October of 2021. And I was like, man, why didn't I bring somebody with me? And I looked at my empty seat and I was like, well, why isn't there something out there to do just that? Connect people to go fish together. Seems like that should exist. And I just had a light bulb go off and thought Co-Angler, an app that's designed to connect people that can offer and request fishing trips, share some costs, knowledge, each other's company. And went home that night and was telling my buddy my bright idea. And he's like, dude, that's awesome. And he bought coangler.com for me for $13 and transferred it over. He's like, you have to build this now. And that was it. And so I had to figure out, I was a chemist for 13 years and worked in an R&D lab and, was just a hobby fisherman, when I could. But it was really that experience that I had, fishing on the water by myself, thinking, man, I wish there was something out there to, connect people to go fishing together, and why not build it? So I ended up kind of had to stumble my way through this entrepreneurial journey, having never started a company or a tech company at that. And actually enrolled in a coding boot camp the following year and started teaching myself coding languages. And for 10 months, I attended these weekly classes, and that's where I started getting help from people that knew what they were doing and built a prototype. And uh, by the end of that program, I actually had a working prototype where I'd done everything. I designed the user interface and coded in the front and back end, uh, and then was lucky enough to actually have the company that offered that program. They were called Codify. Took notice of what I was doing and actually awarded me a $75,000 product development grant. So then my lead developer, who was previously my teacher in that Code Labs program, uh, became my lead developer. They gave me a designer and a project manager, and away I went. And that's when it really kind of started to really come alive once I had those professionals get involved to kind of revamp my designs and user interface, as well as uh, build in a lot of those features that was kind of above my technical capacity there. But it was a really great opportunity to have that support. And so that's kind of the origin story there in a nutshell. But yeah, I was out on the water fishing by myself, came up with an idea for a fishing app, and then went and started learning to code and built it myself, and then had some much needed additional help once I got to a certain point.
So I got a bunch of fishing questions, but I want to ask a couple of these kind of back end coding
Yeah.
questions just because I'm curious. It seems like, and we had talked on the phone and
Mm-hmm.
offline about this, and we could make a joke about this basically being a dating site for people that like to
Mm-hmm.
fish, but it's really more than
Right.
that. But if you think about those dating sites, there's so many of them now. Then you go all the way back to MySpace, Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn. There's code already out there that clearly connects people
Right.
together, that builds a profile for someone. And then when you get into that world
Mm-hmm.
with no previous
Mm-hmm.
experience, because I'm interested in building things like this and have no idea how to do
Mm-hmm.
it, and you just walk that road, is so much of that like plug and play? Can you just like, are there already
So
widgets, I guess, that you can get that build the profile, and or do you have to build this whole thing from
right. So
scratch?
this was all built from scratch. All of this was custom coded. So there are a lot of open source packages out there
Mm.
that help with like one package is called Bootstrap. So you don't necessarily have to design a button from exact scratch with all the dimensions and color palettes and all that stuff. And there's embedded fonts, but Uh, so there are no code or low code solutions that are more what you would consider drag and drop. Those types of platforms like Wix or WordPress or Squarespace that tend to be more drag and drop, you're really
Mm.
limited by your functionality. So once you start getting layers of complexity, like especially with user generated content and social networking, you're going to start finding the limitations of those platforms very quickly. So when you have kind of a scripted idea like co-angler that involves, as simple as it sounds to plan a fishing trip, there's actually a lot of things that go into that that you don't really realize on the surface. What day are you going? What time? For how long? What technique? Upload some photos of your boat. What kind of, make sure your profile's done. All this has to link together to a back end API that fires off, emails and notifications, and so it's almost like a living organism once you get it all tied together and working seamlessly. But I think as time goes on, we are going to continue to see those barriers lowered with the technical requirements for people that want to enter this space, because especially with tools like AI that we have at our fingertips that can really help kind of coach you through this process, and in some cases even write lines of code for you, although it's not perfect yet. uh, I think that's probably a pretty long answer to your question, but it really was a custom coded. Like all of this is hard coded in with all of that logic and styling and everything.
I just find it inspirational when someone like yourself would, you're like all of us in this driftwood crew. Like you went from a rock
Mm-hmm.
musician to a chemist to a coder. Like I don't know how we do. We all find ways to do weird
Right.
next steps. But there's so many things, and some of them I've done. I wanted to be a pilot. I got, like I pushed the limit on others, and others I just dream about. And I'll never figure out the digital side of things. Like I've accepted the fact that this life is half over and I've made it this far. Like I'm never going to code a website, but like, I think it's so cool when someone that doesn't know at all how to do it does it and figures it out.
Yeah, and that I think one of the things we probably all have in common is like, we don't know what we don't know, and a lot of times that leads us to explore things and try and do things. Where if we knew how hard it was going to be in the beginning, we might have just like nixed that idea. But
Yeah, just go fishing alone.
yeah, but yeah, that's for whatever reason I've always kind of been drawn to the hard problems, and because I think those are the most satisfying ones to solve. And whether you get there or not, you're going to learn a tremendous amount and have experienced a lot of growth along the way. So that's something that I've tried to continue to do throughout my life is things that mean something. Like music, for example, the artistry and camaraderie of being in a band, as well as my chemistry background, having that the scientific analytical mode of thinking, and now this entrepreneurial endeavor where I'm really passionate about trying to help people solve the same problem that I experience. And it's I haven't scaled yet and done this globally millions of times over, but I've done it a handful of times already, and it's pretty cool to see from where I started to where I'm at now, that like people have actually used this to go fishing together without me, like other people. And so on one hand, the goal has been accomplished, but there's still a lot more to do. So a lot more people to get out there on the water.
So yeah, right now you have your website up, and we were talking before this because this isn't going to come out for a couple of weeks. So the app may be up and running by the time this actually comes out. But kind of give everyone an
Yeah,
update on where you are with CoAngler and how they can get
yeah.
involved.
So we launched our website application at coangler.com in November of 2003, and so spent that time really trying to get the word out. We've grown to almost 1,100 users in 42 states. We've had 280 fishing trips planned through the app, and have connected almost 100 people to go fish together. So we've really spent the last year focused on, okay, what type of feedback are we getting? What's working well with the app? What do we need to improve? Because nobody builds the perfect product the first time, and that's it. So really spent a lot of time finding out what are the important features to build next. And one of the most overwhelming pieces of feedback we got and questions was, when is it going to be an app in the app stores? I want to be able to download it to my phone. And so really last October, that's when I personally hired on 3 additional developers, and we all started working together and taking what we had built in the web app and building a whole new front end that ties into the same database for the CoAngler app. And so we've worked pretty tirelessly. I've got some awesome developers, one in particular named Tyler, that's just done a fantastic job. And we are done with the app right now. So we've tested it. We've got all the features built. We've submitted to the app stores. They gave us a little bit of feedback. We went and built those new features in, resubmitting that. And so, yeah, by the time this podcast airs, you'll likely be able to download the CoAngler app and Apple Store as well as the Google Play Store. And so that's going to really help with user engagement and ease of use versus having to go to your browser and go to coangler.com and log in. And then a web app, this is a little bit slower. It doesn't work as smoothly as a true native mobile app. So the native mobile app will help with communication features like push notifications. One cool feature that I really like is if somebody posts a trip and you're within 100 miles of the location of that trip, you'll get a push notification saying, hey, there's a new fishing trip in your area. And one thing that I found, especially since we unloaded that feature onto the web app, is people just jump right over to the app. They want to find out who's going fishing in their area. And another thing I've learned too is trips don't last very long. Like once a trip gets on there with these notifications, like we had 2 trips posted today that were just booked right up. They weren't on there for 2 hours. So it was pretty cool to see that kind of really quick response. So when people get on there and they see, oh, there's not that many trips or not many trips in my area, like just hold tight, because when there is gonna have one pop up, they go pretty quick. So
What are some of the destinations that are already up?
yeah, so right now, it's pretty bare bones right now. With we don't have a whole bunch of exotic. A lot of it's right here in the Ozarks. So we've got trips from Arkansas to uh, northern Missouri, but that's one of the biggest challenges I've had starting this app. So me being a Missouri-based company, about half of my users are in Missouri, and the rest of them are spread out all across the country. And one of the reasons for that is because in May of last year, I ended up getting a social media shout out from Bill Dance. So I ended up running into him 2 or 3 different times. And the third time I talked to him, he introduced me to his niece, who's the chief operating officer at Bill Dance Outdoors. Leslie Finney's her name. And she said, Uncle Billy told me to help you, so we're going to help you. And they did a social media post for me on their Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter and TikTok last year. And I was signing up a user every 6 minutes for hours after that, and amassed probably 300 users in less than 24 hours. But because his audience, came over, which is, practically global, that kind of spread us thin. So I really kind of learned early on, like, it may not be the easiest thing to build this, nationwide. You kind of got to start in a more localized market and start small and kind of branch out. So the majority of the trips and opportunities are going to be in this Midwestern region right now. But I mean, historically, over the web app's lifetime, we've had trips from California to Florida to New York to Texas, basically spanning the entire country. So
Now, what about any kind of
yeah,
liability? Like, what are some of the roadblocks that you've
yeah,
had to deal with?
yeah. So as long as you don't get a hook in your eye or fall out of the boat and drown, you're good. So that's, you know, uh,
Or you go on a fishing trip with some dude, and next thing you know, you're living in his
right,
basement. Like,
Yeah, chained to a wall,
yeah,
right.
puts lotion on the
yeah,
skin.
Yeah. This is
right, and
Missouri.
that gets brought up, but honestly, like, those are reasons that I've had so many people tell me not to do what I'm trying to do. But those are the smallest nth of a percent of likelihood that could happen. And at the end of the day, people are only going to go fish with somebody that they know that they're going to feel comfortable with. And if they can't find a Facebook profile, or if there's something that just doesn't feel right during the communication planning the trip, that trip is not gonna. So far out of all the trips where people have connected and went fishing, like, it's been nothing but uh, you know rave reviews. People are actually making friends, and not needing to use the app anymore to find a fishing buddy, because that's something I learned. It's like, if I do my job, they may not need to use co-angler but once, and then they've found their fishing friend and they're on their way. So uh, I'll say, when it comes to liability, it's fish at your own risk. I mean, the platform's completely free to use right now. We don't process any payments. When you want to chip in for gas money, that's something that you take care of at the boat ramp with the person you're fishing with. But also, we've got a terms of use that people have to agree to. So uh, there's an expectation that you've got your fishing license and that you're a law-abiding citizen. And because at the end of the day, you as an individual are going to be held liable. So, but I think,
Well, and again, this goes back to, you don't have to reinvent the
right.
wheel. Clearly, Match.com puts people
Yeah.
together and they cross some sort of legal threshold.
Mhm.
So I'm just thinking of questions other people might
Yeah.
ask you, but there's certainly a precedent
Mhm.
out there that's been set by very large platforms that you can
Yeah.
get people together. Um, and I think this one will be just fine doing that
Mhm.
too.
Yeah, and I think as the platform grows, one of the things that people ask me a lot about is vetting, and so, I'm the sole owner of this company. I have no co-founders, but we're, like I said, about 1,100 users, and so I'm easily able to vet all of these trips and all these users and make sure everything's.
Yeah, like what if I get on there and the profile looks like Daisy
Yeah,
Duke and I show up and it's some dude that looks like
yeah,
you.
yeah,
Might sue you at that
yeah,
point.
and so that would be, you'd be for one, you plagiarized a photo that you don't have copyright ownership of.
I said look like
Okay,
Daisy Duke.
but yeah, that would be false impersonation. I mean, so that's something that's,
As long as you're catfishing, you should be okay.
Yeah,
you know, yeah, I intend to, we're going to experience some of those bad actors as the platform grows, and we are not going to be free from, all negative aspects of the fishing world, but just like any other platform. But at the end of the day, as long as we're trying to do everything we can to keep the user base safe, and really educate people on, here are the steps you need to take before making a fishing trip to make sure you're checking all those boxes to keep yourself as safe as possible. And one thing that I've really found is, from the safety aspect in general, co-angler is something that can actually provide an additional element of safety to your fishing trips. So you think about, especially older people that, fishing alone in colder temperatures, having that fishing buddy on the boat with you or on the bank, really adds another layer of protection, because you might fall in the water, you might have an emergency, and you've got somebody there who can help pull you back in the boat or get you to shore or take you to the hospital. So I think that's another thing that, while anything we do in this world is dangerous, like having somebody else there with you is a nice addition, and gives a lot of people's wives at home that are worried about their husbands fishing alone, some peace of mind as well. So
yeah.
Now I'm curious. I had a buddy that I was talking to, and he was asking me to take his son out fishing
mm-hmm.
because he's really getting into it, and grandpa gave him a little fishing rod, and my buddy just doesn't fish. It's not what he grew up
Mm-hmm.
doing, and he's not familiar with it. But in those situations, could a dad that doesn't know much about fishing but have a son interested jump on here and try to get a trip with somebody that could kind of help him teach his son
Yeah,
how to
that's
fish?
exactly, that is that's a perfect use case scenario. Especially as people are getting busy these days, and the costs of fishing equipment, boats especially, gas, eggs. Some people like taking hard boiled eggs on their fishing trips. But anyways, yeah, that's really what this is intended to do, is really lower that barrier for entry into the outdoors and fishing. So if you can find a willing party. So we've got really two core features on the app. One is the offer a trip. So that's where you pick a location on a map, you outline where you're going, what you're fishing for, how you're doing it, upload some pictures of your boat if you have one, and then publish that for other people to request to join. And you can also do the mirror of that, which is create a trip request, which is you're saying, hey, I'm wanting to go fishing, at this day and time, to this location. Here's kind of what I'm thinking. I'd like to take my son, or, I want to catch white bass on the spawn. And you can post that, and they're all intermixed in the same feed. And so you can actually choose to request a trip, or you can provide a trip. So allows people to wear different hats. But yeah, making it more accessible. Not everybody owns a boat, but a lot of people like getting out there and fishing. There's about 60 million people in the United States that fish in the United States, and that's out of the people that fish, like almost 90% of them fish twice a year, or more. And so the people
Oh,
that fish often. So it's the participation rates among the people that get out there are pretty staggeringly high. So, but yeah, that's.
we jokingly talked about this being a dating app, but
Mhm.
I mean, functionally, it really does a lot of the same things. It lets you pick someone based on a
Mhm.
profile that makes sense for what you're interested in.
Yeah.
So if
I,
you're wanting to go catfishing, you can find somebody that wants to go
yeah.
catfishing. If you're let's say a really good trout fisherman,
Mhm.
likes to fly fish,
Mhm.
but you've never been on a good smallmouth trip, like you can trade with that
Right.
person, and you can kind of barter
Mhm.
skills and time. And I think I mean, when you first explained it to me,
Mhm.
I thought this is pretty
Mhm.
cool. Like this really is pretty
Yeah,
cool.
and I think
So
the similarities to it, there are similarities to a dating website, but I think there's one really drastic difference, is that if this was a dating website, this would be like getting on Tinder and somebody's already got the date planned. It's like, we're going to this coffee shop at 8 p.m. on Friday. Like, that's where this really is different. Like these are actually.
I think you're onto something for a dating
Well,
app.
you know, okay, TGI Fridays this Friday. Here we go. You know,
Pivot. Your investors are like pivot, pivot,
yeah,
pivot.
I'm not getting into that market, but you know, I have to joke just like everyone else, but I can do that now because I've seen the success of these trips, and I've seen how much fun people have had, and you know, all jokes aside, like it's there's nothing else out there like this, and this is a long overdue piece of technology and software that it's just going to be another tool in an angler's pocket. And you know, you brought up the dad taking the kid fishing, like you know, is this younger generation, especially Gen Z, they are tied to technology, and so when they think outdoors, like this could be the you know the platform that really helps introduce you know the, those generations to you know the areas that they want to get interested in, you know, like fishing, and you know they want a piece of technology that's going to help them do that. And so I think
Well, we had a listener viewer write in the other day who said, you know, I love the podcast. But lately you guys have really been pounding on companies and
mhm,
organizations. And he was really making sense until the end. And he said, I just like it when you talk about going fishing, like with Paddle
yeah,
Don. And I was like, oh man, like you had me right. I was agreeing. You had me till the end. But, you know, in honor of that email, we should probably talk a little bit about fishing,
absolutely,
get people excited for wanting to look into
for
co-angler.
sure.
So I'll go around and we'll put Shags on the hot seat. Like first, what trip would you be willing to put up? Not putting you on, not saying you have to, but if you had to put a trip up, what do you think would be your sweet spot for taking somebody else? What would your non-dating app fishing profile look like?
Well, does it have to be in a boat? Do you
No,
do wade
You know,
trips?
anything you
yeah,
want to do.
it can
Well, I
be
mean,
anything. We've had people do float trips together. We've had several bank fishing trips posted. So
it would definitely be a wade fishing trip down on the river we no longer speak of, which is the current river. That's kind of my bread and
mhm,
butter. I mean, if you wanted to throw streamers, or if we wanted to sight
mhm,
fish, try to catch a big one, or just blind bobber cast, I'm really in just the dead drifting woolly buggers. I'm on a Mark Van Patten kick right now, so
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy doing that. So that would be my bread and butter. If you wanted to go on a wade fishing trip on the upper current, I think I could hold my own on that trip.
John, what are you taking people to do?
you know, the very first trip that I ever, so when I came up with this idea, I thought I need to test this out, like before I even have an app built. And so there's a whole host of different Facebook fishing groups out there. And one in particular is called Stockton Lake Fishing Report. I'm about 30, 40 minutes from Stockton Lake. So I was like, I'm going to try this out. So conceptually, I'm going to try this out. So I got on there and I posted, it was in March of 2022, and I got on there and I said, hey, I'm going fishing this Saturday. I'm going to put in at the Aldrich boat ramp. I'm going to run up the Little Sac River targeting white bass. They should be running good. $40, you can join me. And within an hour, I got 3 comments on my post on this fishing group. First one said, how about you pay me $40 and I'll teach you how to fish? So there's your snarky social media people, but to be expected. And the second guy commented on there. He's like, well, I heard the white bass are already starting to run up there, so you should do pretty good. So somebody that just wanted to chime in on the fishing report. And then third guy got on there named Rob Ernst, and he's turned into be a dear friend of mine. And didn't know him from Adam. He's a Marine veteran, and he commented on there and said, you know, I live on the other arm of the lake, and I've always been wanting to get over there and do that on the Little Sac arm. He's like, I'll join you. And we went to direct messages and exchanged about 50 messages and got our trip all planned, and we met. And his wife was a little hesitant, like, you're just going to meet a stranger off Facebook and go fishing? And he's like, oh, it'll be fine, don't worry about it. He looks like a nice guy. And he came out and showed up right at 9 o'clock, and we ran up the river. And I tell you what, we had a blast. We caught like 60 fish that day: white bass, largemouth, smallmouth, and it was just we doubled with 3 or 4 times. We were doubling up. Like, it couldn't have been a better maiden voyage for this concept that I was trying to create. And we fished for 4 or 5 hours, went back to the boat ramp, and he gave me $40 for gas, and we had a good convo and a handshake, and said we'll do it again. And he's turned out to be one of my all time ambassadors for co-angler, and has been supportive and everything that I've done, and helped attend events and get the word out. So I think taking the time to go out and actually just meet people through the kinship of fishing is really what it's all about. Because when you go pay for a guided trip, nothing against guides, because those are the pros, those are the guys that can catch fish. But there's also an expectation there to catch fish. So if you go on a guided trip and it's a little lackluster, you tend to get offered another trip at a discounted rate, but you still had to pay that price. Well, co-angler is more of like a no pressure type trip. It's like, some days you're just going to go out there and get skunked, but if you got a buddy with you, you can both kind of complain at the same time. It makes it just a little bit better. But yeah, so my fishing trips right now are really kind of centered around the white bass run. That's just, they're an okay fish to eat. I think they're great if you do them right, but for me, like, something about just hundreds of thousands of white bass running from the lake to the rivers, and you can just get on top of them, and they fight like a son of a gun. Like, you get them on light tackle, and they just, they'll rip the pole out of your hands if you're not paying attention. So, but I enjoy all types of fishing though too. Catfishing is another big, passion of mine too. My mom and dad are absolutely ate up with catfishing, and uh, I really like limb lining a lot. Had some co-angler trips last summer where I set limb lines and catch channel cats, and that's what I do to get meat in the freezer and have big fish fries. Because one year I caught a 22-pound flathead catfish out of the Pond de Terre on a limb line, and I was in my kayak at the time. This was even before co-angler went live.
I think you might actually be Paddle Don's brother.
Yeah. I've never noodled though, but I will never noodle. But I know it's illegal in Missouri. But yeah, lemon.
All right, Brandon, what trip are you doing?
I think it would have to right now, man. I'm pretty high on these farm ponds. Yeah. There's two things that I would be able to help people with. I've shown 4 or 5 people in the last week how to rig a slip bobber. Just the little basic things have gone by the wayside, like kid knows how to throw a bait caster with a jerk bait, but it doesn't know how to put a slip bobber rig together. So just hammering crappie right now, one after another. And it's very true. I like catching a lot more than I like fishing. I'm still an 8-year-old when it comes to that. And when I'm expecting that bobber to go down every time I pitch it in, and there's another 12 to 14-inch crappie on the end of the line, I don't get tired of that. Like, I go until I run out of minnows. So that's one. I would teach people how to basically harvest fish to eat from farm ponds with worms and minnows. In the most with highly expensive St. Croix rods and the most aerodynamic slip bobbers you can find. And then fly fishing those same waters for largemouth bass. I feel like you can teach people so much easier how to cast on these open water ponds. And Shags, you haven't seen it yet, but the Barge 2.0 is now official and floating around the lake. So
you've had the maiden voyage?
Oh yeah, I'm out doing chores off of it, spraying weeds already. But it's the Barge is basically my version of a pontoon boat that I make out of encapsulated foam dock floats and just pressure treated lumber. Shout out to Josh Lane and his boys for hooking these up. So now I've got a 6 by 12 foot version, which is 2 feet longer than my old version. And I could take people out in the middle of my lake with a fly rod and have them cast for bass and catch 24 largemouth and never get hung up in the weeds, never get hung up in a tree, actually learn how to cast before they go down and fish the current river with shags, where you have to have a lot more skill in fly casting. So I think there's a lot to offer in teaching in both of those opportunities. One for those people that are looking to catch fish that you can keep and eat in a fun way, and one to help introduce people to fly fishing in an exciting, environment that is conducive to not getting tangled up on every cast. All right, so those
you
are the
went from
ones.
liability of just having a stranger in your boat to like, come out to my house, I'll put you on my pond.
Yeah, I don't even have a basement. So Shags is taking people to the current river to fly fish for trout. I'm going to help you learn how to most effectively catch bluegill and crappie out of farm ponds. And John will just take you anywhere you want to go. White bass fishing, cat fishing. All right, so if those are the ones you're willing to offer up, if you got on Co-Angler tomorrow and you were scrolling, like what trip would make you stop in your tracks and answer right away? You're like, oh man, I've wanted to do that for so long. Like, I'm in. And let's keep it to Missouri.
Oh,
Let's not go
well,
let's not go peacock bass in the Amazon,
yeah.
Shags. Like,
Golden Dorado and the
We're
hills
just
of
like I had a guy
Bolivia.
down.
we're
I had a,
booked. We're booked.
I had
for
a guy
that.
down in Louisiana post a crabbing trip last year, and I was just like, man, I wish I was closer. I'd have came down and went because I didn't even think about that, when I started this. But
Within the confines of Missouri.
yeah, you know, I think it's for me, it's not so much what the target species or technique is rather it's who is it, and
Oh, very paddle down of you.
and so I really would, there's some incredible anglers that I've been able to get out there with. And I've just learned so much from. So if we had somebody like a Rick Klein, like get on, and offer a trip, I would jump at the just to be able to be on the boat with him and hear his philosophy on fishing. I don't even care about his casting and bait and tech. All that to me is like those are just minor details. Like the angler is really where I think the true skill, exudes from. And so, but yeah,
He lives in the
yeah,
Ozarks, right? We need to get him on the podcast, man.
yeah, he lives on Bryant Creek, south of 8. So.
Yeah, I was. All right, you outed him. I wasn't going to out him exactly. Go ahead and give his address.
It's 1-5. No, I don't know. It's
3215
Bassmaster Classics Avenue. I don't know, but
County Road.
Yeah. But I'll just say one more thing too about like the idea about whether it be confrontation on a boat or on one of these trips or things going bad. Like I came across a quote from Forrest Wood, founder of Ranger Boats, and granted he might have just been trying to sell boats, but he said there's no better common ground that two people can find than on a fishing boat. And I've spoken to so many guides that have been spent their entire careers guiding on the White River, and I've asked them how many times have you just had like a real bad interaction with clients on the boat. And he said out of Donald Craner is one of them that comes to mind, and a big friend of the Wood family, and he said out of my 30 some odd years guiding, like you could probably count them on one hand. There's something about being out on the water. Where people are just more likely to get along. It's like, why would you want to fight and argue, in a beautiful, serene setting, like especially the White River. So
that's what the boat ramp's for. That's where all the fist fights are.
Yeah.
All right, Shags. Which
Once
one?
you get on the water, you're good. It's just getting there.
So John avoided the question.
Dude, that's a tough one. I mean, we've talked about that for quite a while of trying to get on the Missouri River and maybe do some back bouncing. Like I'm not as interested in limb lining or even jug fishing. I'd like to have, because I bought that big cat fishing rod at the CFM auction like 3 or 4 years ago.
Oh yeah.
And I would like the idea of just back bouncing those baits and like feeling the tug or feeling them slurping and try to catch a big catfish that way. That would get my attention. Or any type of top water action. If like we're going to throw top water for smallmouth or largemouth on one of these big reservoirs, that would get my attention too.
Mine's the muskies. If anybody from the Palm Bay Terre Muskie Club is listening,
that's a good one.
I just want somebody to take me muskie fishing and show me how to do it. I've tried it myself. I go out and throw. I have earned it. I'm well over 10,000 casts at this point.
You have your clicker.
I have.
In front of them.
Yeah, like it seems my life is that way. No, not 10,000 for you, silly. It's 10,000 squared. But no, I would love for one of those musky guide captains down there on Palm de Terre to be like,
Yeah.
hey man, I would love to take you fishing.
Fellas.
Perfect example, Shags. We posted that Lake Erie article, my column from this week, and I got an email today. Hey Brandon, saw your article on Lake Erie. Blah blah blah. We appreciated the shout out. We've already started fishing this spring and are off to a great start. We'd be happy to have you out again. Are you available this April? So Muskie Guides, copy and paste and send that along. And Shags, we got to figure out when we can go to Lake Erie in April. So
God, have you seen my calendar?
mine's
My
just as
April
bad.
is pretty much booked already.
My problem is I have 3 calendars. So I look at one and I'm like, oh, that's not too bad. And then I look at the next one and I'm like, that's a little rough. And then I overlay them and like this has to stop.
Yeah, I don't have a weekend off in April.
You just got to quit this day-to-day thing. Quit your real job.
Yeah, speaking of that, is this your full-time job now, John, or do you got a real job and just do this
Yeah,
on
I've
the
been
side?
doing this full time for about 26 months now. Yeah. Yeah, this is something I dove, head first into and really believe in, and kind of set myself up to where I could extend my runway, sold my house, and cashed out my mortgage so I could be able to continue to hire developers and keep this thing going, because there's got to be somebody that gets this going, and I'm not seeing any other people trying to take on this responsibility. So uh, and I also, fishing's just the start too. Like once I really get this scaled in the fishing world, I plan on immediately going over into hunting as well as hiking, and kayaking, paddle sports as well. So there's a lot of outdoor activities out there where people simply just need a partner to help with participation. So yeah.
Well, I love the plan to scale. That's a good vision, because you can take this anywhere: hiking, camping, like you said, hunting, mountain biking, off-road racing. There's just no end
Right.
to it.
Well, I mean, if you're,
Golfing. Do they have a co-golfer yet? Shags will sign up.
I'm not even going to get into it. I went out and played, and I did not do very well whatsoever. You're not running any ads on your website, and you're not charging people to be a part of it. Do you have a plan on how you're going to make some money off this thing?
Yeah, I do have a plan. So it is going to be membership based. When it comes time to start turning on revenue, for now we're at that stage where you can't just start charging people before you kind of hit that critical mass. So we still need, right now what we need is more trips, and eventually once we get to the point where it feels right, we'll actually implement a subscription model. So it'll be $5 a month or $45 a year. Um, and so it'll be based on a freemium model. So you'll still be able to create your account, access the app, view the trips. It's not until you hit that button to send those requests that you're going to be prompted with, start a subscription. But we did run, a promotion when we first started. First 1,000 users are going to get lifetime membership. So we're over that now. So if user 1001 and up, eventually once we turn on revenue, if you want to use this to go fishing, you have to pay. But still, I mean, it's a tremendous amount of value. We're trying to make sure that it's affordable at $5 a month, $45 a year, to account for some of the seasonality, because really I've experienced the value firsthand. Like, one of the cool things about building this app was, like, I was one of the first people that got to use it. And so, for example, there was a trip posted uh, just a few months after the app went live. There was a gentleman that was fishing a tournament on Table Rock Lake, and he was down there a few days earlier to practice, and he posted a couple trips saying, hey, if you want to come and jump on my boat while I'm practicing and fish with me, $60. So I was like, well, heck, I'm going to join that. And so I went down there and met him at the boat ramp at 7 a.m. And he had a brand new Phoenix boat with a 250 Mercury and rigged to the teeth with jack plate, power poles, electronics. And, like, I was like, okay, this is about $100,000 rig. But we got out there and we fished all day. We had a great time, and caught fish and fished for 8 hours. Got back to the boat ramp, and I had a co-angler T-shirt that I gave him, and I went to go give him $60, and he only took 20. And so then I was driving home from Kimberling City thinking to myself, like, what just happened? Like, it cost me $20 in a T-shirt, and I fished out of this $100,000 bass boat with this awesome dude all day on a beautiful Table Rock Lake. It's like there's a tremendous amount of value like that's coming from a platform like this. So, and I got to experience it firsthand. But I do have some cool things coming up that's going to help me subsidize user revenue. So, I actually just kicked off a new partnership. It'll become available here in the coming weeks. It's a company called Grouper. They're an insurance benefit provider for United Healthcare. And basically, what they're trying to do is provide wellness reimbursements for people that are engaging in social activities. They've been looking for a fishing partner for months, and we finally had our paths cross. So, people that sign up on Grouper that are 65 and up have Medicare Part C Advantage plans, which is 17 million Americans, are going to be able to get reimbursed for their co-angler membership and fishing trip costs. Last year, the reimbursement was $110 a year. This year, they're still working out the details, but I'm hoping that that's going to be not only a distribution channel, but a way to start realizing some early stage revenue with the company and really targeting that age group that needs a platform like this a lot, to connect and get out on the water together. So, but in the future, if we get to millions of users, ad revenue is going to take, a significant role in generating income for the company. But, right now I'm in the fundraising stages too. So I'm looking for, whether it's venture capital or non-dilutive grants. I'm actually a top 20 finalist right now in a nationwide grant that could potentially award the company $500,000. It's through the Richard King Mellon Foundation. So it's called the Social Impact Award pitch competition. They're looking for companies that are addressing things like economic development, economic mobility, health and well-being, and conservation. And so I submitted an application in December last year and made it to the top 60, then the top 30, now I'm in the top 20, and I'm being considered for the conservation piece because I've already pledged, 10% of future profits to meaningful mission aligned organizations that are focused on promoting, protecting, and preserving, our natural resources. And so I already have one of those conservation partners secured. So that's the Missouri Conservation Heritage Foundation. And so I've already pledged support for the Johnny Morris Institute for Fisheries, Wetlands, and Aquatic Systems. The University of Missouri Extension is going to, use their dollars to help train, the next generation of environmental scientists and wildlife managers and conservation agents. And so something that's really going to be a data-driven, institute to help inform the rest of the country on how to best, protect these natural resources. But there's something that I feel an obligation internally. I'm also, a chemist and a scientist, and so water quality is really important to me. So my stream team award back over my shoulder. But if I connect two people to go fishing and they take two limits of fish out of that water body, that's two less limits that water body has. And so, there's a obligation that I feel like I have to pay that forward. I have to make sure that I'm, trying to support organizations that are doing the right things, make sure that we have, healthy waterways to catch fish and doing things to help educate and promote, these resources in a responsible manner. So, but yeah, so conservation, it's important.
That's awesome, man. You're doing a lot of cool stuff, and I just appreciate you keeping that mindset too of paying it forward and not forgetting where you came from and how important just conservation actually is here in the state of Missouri. It's commendable.
Yeah,
well done.
you. It's not a choice. It's an obligation for me. I really do feel like, and one of the things is like, especially our outdoorsmen and women, like they are the people that get out there, they see the things firsthand. Like those are our best conservationists right there. And because they're the people that are the most passionate about it because they enjoy the resources themselves. So they want to make sure that they're taken care of. And one thing I love about that is that, this world we live in, especially in America, it's so, divided a lot of times, whether it be politics or whatever else. But especially conservation is just one of those. It's bipartisan. You just have wholehearted support on both sides from people that, yeah, we can agree that we want clean water, because everybody needs clean water. So.
You would hope
You
so.
would hope so.
We can find some people that don't agree.
I'm sure we could find them, but there's probably some like, I won't go.
Well, when we ran the last renewal of the park soil and water sales tax, which in Missouri we pay a 1/10 of a cent sales tax that funds our state parks. Which, if you've never been to a state park in a state other than Missouri, you'd be surprised to know they're not free. Because you pay this small tax, you get to go to your state parks, which are some of the best in the nation, hands down, for free every time you enter one. So if you're not taking advantage of that, then that's on you. The other half of that money goes to soil and water conservation. So every county in Missouri has a soil and water conservation district. The money goes to them through the DNR, and then private landowners can go to those soil and water conservation districts and apply for habitat work and get cost share money back. So it's actually an opportunity that we all agree is a good thing to privatize some public funds, in the sense that if you have an erosion problem on your farm, okay, you can take a little bit of my tax money and his tax money and her tax money through this program and fix it, which actually increases the value of your farm, but it increases the value of life for me and everyone else, including the fish and birds and snakes and frogs that live in that water. So that small tax benefits everyone in the state, from the parks and recreation crowd to the healthy soil, healthy water crowd to the agriculture crowd to the hunting and fishing crowd. And yet 19% of the people voted against it. So you got 81%. So yeah, Steve Ranella said, so 19% of people hate clean water? I was like, I guess so.
In Missouri, they do.
And state parks and healthy fish and wildlife. So there's always going to be that 20%.
It is funny because my co-host on the Morning Shag, Trevor, him and his wife and her family went to Texas, and they were going to stop by a state park. And Trevor was the one that says, "Hey, do we have any money to pay to get in the state park?" And all of his in-laws are like, "What are you talking about? State parks are free." And he's like, "No, not in all the states they're not. We just got really lucky here in Missouri." So yeah, I think sometimes Missourians forget on how blessed we are here in the state with our conservation areas, our state parks, and everything that we have here isn't like this across the board.
Yeah. Who do you guys think the greatest conservationist in Missouri, or say the United States, is in our current generation of living people?
We probably don't know their names. We could name the greatest communicator conservationists, because I just had this conversation with a kid the other day of two of my roommates from college, Greg and Eric James. Sadly, we lost Eric to cancer. Their nephew is at Purdue right now, and he's in wildlife, fish and wildlife, and reached out through his uncle asking me for advice on what he should do to get started in his career. And I said, you should learn to communicate, because if Aldo Leopold couldn't write, you'd never heard of him. If Theodore Roosevelt couldn't give speeches and write, you'd have never heard of him. So there's conservationists out there that work in these state agencies and federal agencies and private NGOs that are 10 times smarter than the people that can actually tell the stories. But it's the people who can tell the stories that are remembered and that are, put to the forefront of it. So I truly believe, to answer your question, we don't know who that person is. There's a guy named Carl Malcolm. He came up kind of through the Meat Eater podcast, but everyone I know, he's our age. He's in Wisconsin, was in New Mexico for a while. He's an unbelievable source of knowledge for conservation. Dr. Josh Millspaw used to be the head of the School of Natural Resources at Mizzou. He's now the fellow in residence for the Boone and Crockett Club at the University of Montana. So that's one of the endowed positions from the Boone and Crockett Club, which is an extension of Theodore Roosevelt. So Dr. Millspaw, making Missouri proud. He's right up there, probably at the top. And then it gets diversified to, as far as like educators. We have a woman in Columbia named Dr. Susan Flotter. She's been on the podcast. She's in her mid 80s. She's a walking encyclopedia of everything Leopold and that era. So man, it's a very hard question to answer, one that none of us could get right. It would be opinion, but I'll stick by the fact that that's where the benefit of being a good communicator comes into whatever profession you're in. You might be the best of something, but if you can't explain it to other people and share that, then it gets forgotten with time. People will not even know you existed. And somebody that's not as knowledgeable as you, who put books out, who wrote articles, who did podcasts, who made films, they're the ones that get remembered.
Yeah, and I mean, all I could say is a couple that I look up to a lot, and really, really, just even Savannah, my fiance, and I have said, like, if we can be like them when we're their age, we're successful, and that's Bruce and Jan Sassman. Like, we really look up to them in the conservation world, and now he's a state rep and doing a lot of good things for conservation through Jefferson City. But just the way those two handle each other, handle conservation, and just how they handle the public, and it's just anytime they're around, I always want to go bend their ear and visit with them. So got a lot of respect for both those two.
Same, always giving back.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they
Do
have
you
so
have
much
one?
respect for those people I was just talking about. They're the ones that have put on the plays and the reenactments with Theodore Roosevelt impersonators, John Muir impersonator, Aldo Leopold, Henry David Thoreau. They built a replica cabin of Aldo Leopold's shack and Henry David Thoreau's cabin at Walden Pond. And I've stayed in both of them for youth hunts that they open their land up for. Not only did they build these cabins, but then they'll let, certain people come and stay and hunt. So my daughter Annabelle killed her only turkey to date on their farm, and we stayed in the Thoreau cabin, and Jeff Bloomer and his son Landon and I went youth hunting there and stayed in the Thoreau cabin.
Wow.
So Bruce and Jan, great example. What about you? Who's yours?
And this is something that I've thought a lot about, and I've had, so I grew up. I'm 15 minutes north of Springfield, and so that right there screams one thing:
Johnny
Johnny
Morris.
Morris. And I know that there might be some out there that wouldn't agree, but I've heard from several different people, that claim wholeheartedly, that believe that he's the best conservationist this country's seen since Teddy Roosevelt. Uh, Somebody that's really put the dollars and the initiative and the created environment, in his stores that kind of exhibit the outdoors, and try and get people excited and passionate about fishing. And I think because I've grown up in the backyard of Bass Pro, and they used to have a McDonald's at their headquarters store, so we just go eat lunch there. So it was like, like all these free aquariums, it's like I was constantly exposed to, what a Bass Pro is like, to be born and raised in the Springfield area and have that in my backyard. I just thought that was normal, that everybody had this type of thing. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized really how much of a focus he had on bringing the outdoors to people, in an urban setting. And for me, with creating a fishing company, you have to thank your forefathers, but there's nobody that's ever walked the earth that's put more fishing poles in somebody's hand than Johnny Morris. And through all of his outreach with, we have the Wonders of Wildlife Museum, we've the Johnny Morris Institute that I spoke about earlier, the University of Missouri Extension, and his support for organizations like Ducks Unlimited and National Wild Turkey Federation and the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. And I've had a couple of chances to run into him and meet him personally, and just one of the most humble people I've met, and he has a a pretty small circle. But I was really kind of flattered, at how I was talking to literally the second richest person in the state, worth about $8 to $10 billion, and shook my hand just like the next guy and wanted to talk fishing. And so, but meanwhile, all of these accomplished anglers and outdoorsmen and women around him that are just screaming that everything this guy does for conservation is just we can't thank him enough, because we're not even really seeing, almost like you brought up earlier, like we may not even know who the best conservationist is. But like, I remember a story that Bill Dance told about, there was a I think it was the Missouri River, or no, it was the Mississippi River. There was some DNR wanting to change some slot limits on the blue cats, and like it was gonna, the fishing community was just like in upheaval, and there was some phone calls made to Johnny Morris, and there were stuff like that. You can actually get institutional changes that are benefiting not only the outdoorsman, but the natural resource and the fish itself. So I would vote Johnny Morris, just because I've seen firsthand the impact that he's made on the outdoors as a as a recreation industry at large, a boating industry. And I think
It would be very hard to argue that Johnny Morse isn't the most impactful conservationist alive
mm-hmm,
today.
Yeah.
It'd be very, and a lot of that comes with that $8 to $10 billion you were just talking about
mm-hmm,
too. I mean, when you mix the ways and the means
right,
together, he's got the passion for it and he's got the means to make it
mm-hmm,
happen. On a smaller scale, but also in a big dollar scenario, I got to be close to Rudy
mm-hmm,
Raceline and what he was working on with prairie restoration. And I watched millions and millions of dollars move around to try to plant some
mm-hmm,
grass. It's not easy. It's not easy to bring institutional change, and it takes a lot of
mm-hmm.
money to do it. And kudos to Johnny. Um, that is the one place I round up every time. So if I
Every
check
single
out
time.
every single time, because when I was running
Mm-hmm.
CFM, we got funds from the
Yeah.
outdoor fund. I know where that money goes. I know how impactful it
Mm-hmm.
is. Um, Same, I've got legislative stories where you work and you work and you work and you sweat and you cry and you bleed. And then they pick up the phone and call Johnny Morris, and 5 minutes later it's
Yeah.
fixed. Like it was just, why didn't I think of that?
Oh,
Um,
that's funny.
I do have a Johnny Morris story. I don't know if we have time for it.
Oh, we always got time for a Johnny Morris
This
story.
this is kind of my co-angler, uh, you know, outreach and networking, and but it's just such a good story. Because you can't make this stuff up. And if there's any entrepreneurs out there watching the podcast, there's a pretty valuable lesson to be learned here as well. So I brought up the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame a little bit earlier. So that's an event that takes place here at the White River Convention Center here at Bass Pro Shops every September. And so it was the 2023 class getting inducted, and I was there. This was a couple months before the Co-Angler web app had went live. And so I had a friend of mine that I went with that at the time was the creative director for Major League Fishing, and so I got to sit at their table and feel important. But it was the first time I was in this like who's who environment in the professional bass fishing industry. And I had a suit on, and I had these rack card flyers that I was walking around. Hey, you guys, you need to learn about the Co-Angler app. I was just like talking to everybody. And but it was the first time I was ever in the same room as Johnny Morris. And I remember I was sitting there next to my buddy, and I was like, Johnny Morris is here. You think I should walk up to him and tell him about Co-Angler? And he looked at me and goes, "Man, he doesn't get out very often, and he's getting pretty old. You may never have another chance." And that was all I needed to hear. And so at the time, Johnny was out in the hallway talking to somebody. So I walked out in the hallway, pulled out my phone, pretended like I was talking on the phone, and just started pacing up and down the hallway, waiting for Johnny to get free. And he finally got free, and he started walking my direction. So I put my phone down and walked right up to him. I was shaking like a leaf. was like, "Hey, Johnny, I just want to introduce myself to you. My name is John Bledsoe, and I'm got this new co-angler app." And I pull out my rack card and hand it to him. I was like, "It's an app to connect people to go fish together." And he took it and looked at it and said, "That's great, but I'm sorry, bud. I got to take a piss." And he put it in his jacket and walked off with his jacket. And so there was my 15 seconds with Johnny Morris. And so fast forward a year later, and of course I go to the same event again, the 2024 induction ceremony, and I'd been there for about 45 minutes, and I'm just kind of, networking and working my way around. And I come from the hallway back into where the auditorium was, where the awards were, and I look to my left, and there's Johnny Morris standing at this table on the wall with nobody else around him, and he kind of started halfway walking my direction. I was like, okay, here we go again. So I just walk right up to him. I go, "Hey, Johnny, I got a favor to ask of you." And he goes, "Sure, bud. How can I help you?" And I said, "I've got this Bass Pro hat that I got from your 50th anniversary a couple of years ago, and I've got all these Hall of Famers that have signed this hat, and there's a spot right next to the Bass Pro logo. Would you be kind enough to autograph that for me?" And he just lit up. And he was like, "Buddy, I'd be honored. You just made my day. Thank you so much." He's like, "Where's the hat at? I'll sign it right now." And I was like, "Well, it's out in my pickup. I'll have to go get it here in a minute." And then I segued and I pulled out my business card with my co-angler logo on it. And I started telling him, I said, "I don't know if you remember me or not, but I met you here last year." And he looked down, he saw my logo, and he goes, "Oh my gosh, buddy. I was putting on my jacket a couple hours ago." They wear these blue Hall of Fame jackets. "And I pulled your flyer out of my inside coat pocket, and I saw that, and I said, 'Son of a gun, I never followed up for that kid last year.'" And he took me right over and introduced me to one of his right hand men and said, "This is John from Co-Angler. You need to make sure you follow up with him on his company and his business," because I dropped the ball. And then the next thing you know, I'm standing there in a circle. And we're all just sharing fishing stories, talking back and forth. And Johnny's like, "This is your guy right here. Alan will make sure he follows up with you." And then, Alan just jumped right in and got all my contact info. We exchanged phone numbers. And about a month later, I was invited to go pitch at headquarters to Bass Pro. So talks are
How'd it go? How'd the
great.
meeting
I've
go?
got a great relationship. They didn't cut me a check after the first meeting, obviously, but no, I've still got a great relationship there, and they're wanting to stay up to date on my progress, and so I'm respecting that connection and not overdoing it, but just making sure I'm giving them some important milestone updates as they arise.
So Shags and I, we both have a plaque from Johnny Morse that has an actual Native American artifact. It's got like a hatchet head
Oh
on it.
wow.
And there was maybe 15 of us or so that were together for an event,
Mm-hmm.
and Johnny made one of those for each of us, which is super cool. I think he's gonna go grab it.
Wow.
But for me, one of the coolest things is when he did the opening on Wonders of
Oh,
Wildlife, you
greenbacks.
know.
Wow. That is so cool.
Yeah. So the things that he does like that are what makes him so special. But when he did the opening of Wonders of
Mm-hmm.
Wildlife, Kevin
Yeah.
Costner, uh, Jimmy Carter, George Bush, all those people were on
Yeah.
stage, and so was I. Like I was up
What?
there. So there was like 75 of
Yeah.
us that he called the leading
Yeah.
conservationists in
Yeah.
America. So you can see me standing there about 20 feet from the president in the kids section,
What an
like
honor.
down
What an
front.
honor.
But yeah, and then I wrote some articles about it,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a handwritten letter from Johnny Morris, and it's, thank you for the fine
Mm-hmm.
article. I really appreciate your support of WOW.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like you said, this dude's worth $8 to $10 billion. He doesn't need to write a letter to a guy that does a small newspaper
Mm-hmm.
syndicate in Missouri, but yet there
Yeah.
it is. And to be very honest, uh, I had a fear that something bad was going to happen to the cabin or in retaliation. So when we talk about all the things that I lost in there,
Yeah.
it's because the last time I left, I only carried one thing out with me, and it was that. As I was walking out of the cabin and turning out the lights for what would become the very last time, I never stepped foot in there
Mm-hmm.
again. I grabbed that off the wall. I was already packed. I'd gone back in for something. and there's all of that stuff everywhere. I could have grabbed one of Shags's bucks, but instead I grabbed that letter that was framed from Johnny Morris,
Wow.
and I still have it. It hangs right next to that plaque that he just showed
Yeah.
you. So
I don't
yeah,
blame you. You didn't want to grab one of my heads because then there'd been proof I shot the biggest buck down there.
that was all right. I actually had the place burned, so those deer
Yeah.
would go, and you would never
Bragging
be able
rights
to say that
revoked.
again. But I would honestly go hang that letter from him back up on the
Yeah.
wall and grab the guest book if I could switch it out.
Mhm.
The letter was meaningful from him, but the letters from the kids that spent time there
Right.
and everyone else that's been that's the thing that I don't know why I left that laying on the table. Because I didn't think somebody was going to burn my house down, and I didn't think they were going to steal a notebook full of memories. Live and
Yeah.
learn.
Yeah. Well, we can't get you out of here without the mystery bait bucket. So what you see here is an actual vintage bait bucket we got from the Midway Antique Mall. And people submit questions, and that's a fun way to wrap up the podcast. Very rarely does it have anything to do with the outdoors. So if you do have a question, you can email us info@driftoutdoors.com, and Brandon will get back to you in 6 months. Or you can
Maybe
send a direct message on Facebook or
within 6
Instagram,
months. Within 6 months.
and I'll usually get back to you within a day. But oh
That's why
boy,
you
here's a
should be in
fun one.
charge of the emails.
What? Oh, this because I know how much Brandon loves food. What's an underrated pizza topping? Chris Sparks is asking that question. An underrated pizza topping.
Well, do we have? I mean, my number one go-to is mushrooms. Is mushrooms too common of an answer? Do you guys put mushrooms on your pizza?
I do. I like
I just found
mushrooms.
50 morels yesterday, so you just gave me a new pizza topping idea.
In what county did you find 50
Cedar.
morels? All right. We haven't found any here yet. They got to be coming though. If you're finding that, are they the little
Yeah.
blacks? Yeah. All right.
Well, I've been seeing a couple of Subarus on the side of the roads around the timber at my place, so it's the season. They got to be.
They're
They're
starting.
starting to pop up.
Yeah, we're probably a good week away. It was really nice and warm over the
Mhm.
weekend, and then it got back to I had to have a jacket on
Yeah.
today. But yeah, man, I'm excited for the morels. So are mushrooms, is that an acceptable answer? Because I could do a cheese and mushroom pizza. Mushroom sausage and pepperoni is my go-to. I'm pretty boring on that. But
I love pineapple, and I know that's like some type of forbidden fruit to put on pizza, but regardless, pineapple always makes it slap.
I feel like pineapple and mushrooms are in the same category of like common but not common, you know?
Well, if I had to pick another one, then have you had artichoke hearts on a
I
pizza?
have.
Those are really good.
On kind of like a fancier one of those like spinach and artichoke pizzas,
That was
cream
my
sauce.
Yeah, you're an Ozark guy. So down in Branson, Mr. Gilberte's down there in what's is it Fourth Sight? It doesn't matter. That they'd make really good pizzas. And I misread the menu and I thought it was just $3 a topping for the meats. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. So I'll just get like 3 meats, and then I thought the vegetables weren't $3 a piece. Dude, I made a $60 pizza because I added artichoke, mushroom. I just went down and picked like all the vegetables and like 3 meats. And I'm not even kidding you. That receipt or bill came out and it looked like an old timey scroll. I had to open it like this because it was so long. And yeah, because I put 20 toppings on this pizza and it ended up costing me $60.
To go
But
obscure,
artichoke and pineapple and mushroom were all on there.
to go obscure though, there's a pizza place Kansas City somewhere. It's called The Other Place. Um, Cedar Falls. They're around Iowa, and they did an Oktoberfest pizza that was Polish sausage and sauerkraut, and that
Ooh.
that was good. It was real
What
good.
about anchovies?
So,
We're talking fishing though too. I mean, you gotta.
I love anchovies on a Caesar salad. Like down in Jeff City at Madison's, I have them add anchovies. I pay extra to have anchovies added to my Caesar salad.
I don't know if I've ever had anchovies on a pizza.
I love them. They're salt.
They're good. I like. Yeah, little slimy salt bombs.
That's a good description. Slimy salt bombs.
All right. Well, we need to get a pizza with artichoke, mushroom, pineapple, and apparently anchovy now, and some sauerkraut
I'm
and
in.
I'm into.
morels.
All right, did you and Savannah end up going to Gibraltar's after we left?
No, we didn't. We
No.
didn't. We didn't make it over there.
So that's one really good obscure pizza place. John, do you have a pizza place that you love that's not a real well
Yeah, here
known?
in Springfield, the Big Slice.
The
Yeah,
Big
they've got a
Slice.
location on pretty much Sunshine and National, and then they just opened up a bar called Big Slice Pizza and Games. It's on Park Central East in downtown Springfield. They got arcades and golf simulators and fun stuff, but it's New York style pizza and it is good. Uh,
There's a to one up your New York style. There's a Chicago style in Cole
mm,
Camp called
mm,
Calgaro's. It's the best pizza I've found in Missouri so
boy,
far.
I love Chicago
It's
style.
This isn't the Chicago deep dish. What I like about a Chicago pizza, like even the deep
Yeah,
dish, isn't a lot of bread. People look at that pan and they think it's half
right.
full of bread. It's not. It's a thin layer at the bottom. Lauren says I just like lasagna disguised as
Yeah,
pizza. Yeah. But
That's a,
uh a thin Chicago pizza is just that thin crust on the bottom, but just mounds of
right.
topping, just tons of cheese, big chunks of
Mm-hmm.
sausage, thick sliced mushrooms. That's what Calgaro's is. That kind of pizza,
I'll
cut in squares.
have to remember that.
well, do we got a final cast of the pod? Final thoughts?
Dude, I'm just pulling for you. Like this isn't an
Yeah.
easy. It's not an easy haul that you're trying to pull off. We've got friends like Brad Luttrell and the whole crew at Go
Mm-hmm.
Wild that is no more. I mean, these dudes raised over $10
Yeah.
million, and it and I think from an outsider looking in, they kept pivoting a
Mm-hmm.
lot. I'm not sitting here playing armchair
Mm-hmm.
quarterback, but like my advice, from what little MBA knowledge I picked up in that program, like stay the
Right.
course. Like just stay the course. It's going to work or it's
Mm-hmm.
not. And
Yeah.
don't be a co-angler site that decides you're going to start selling shovels or something. Like stay the course, and it's a great idea,
Mm-hmm.
and we're just pulling for you and hope we can help in any way we can, I guess. But I love the
Mm-hmm.
concept. A dating app for fishing. It's perfect.
Well, be sure to hit all your socials. Where can people be a part of this? Get more information, all
Yeah.
that stuff. I'll put it in the
Yep.
show notes
So we got
too.
coangler.com. Pretty much coangler is going to be your main handle. Either co.coangler or co-coangler. Going to get you a lot of different stuff. So Facebook, /coangler. Uh, YouTube, same thing, @coangler. TikTok @coangler. LinkedIn. And then, really the app stores is going to be the main, release. I mean, we're recording this podcast here on March 31st. I expect, by April 7th, it's going to be available for download, Google Play stores, and as well as the Apple Store. So, yeah, lots of ways you can find us. Even just Googling co-angler is a good way to come across. It's pretty well optimized now, where it should be showing up towards the top. Um, but yeah, and to your point, Brandon, like, nothing ventured, nothing gained. I believe that, this isn't a rock solid, like, you know, there's, I guess the best way to put this is there's still a lot of unknowns on, start a lot of tech companies start and, fade away. But, I really feel like this is going to go one of three ways for me. I'm kind of a pragmatic, thinker, but, startups don't burn out; they fade away. So option number one is this just kind of slowly drifts off into the sunset if nothing happens. Option number two is it's just going to be a long, slow grind to success, and I think honestly it's the most likely scenario compared to option 3, which is just rocket ship growth. Something happens that you go viral and you're trying to, keep the servers from catching on fire. But, with option number 2, that's really the key ingredient there is the tenacity and persistence. With me, like you said, staying the course. Time can be your friend as much as it can be your enemy. So, making sure that you continue to learn, and because this isn't a passion project, but also, I think something that can really result in good for a lot of humanity. And
There's more options.
mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen that? Have you ever seen that clip? It's from a movie with John Goodman, where he says $2.5 million. That's your number, 2.5 million. Then after that, it's fu money. Don't want to do it, fu. Don't want to do that, fu. Like, you just got to know your number, and then expect option number 4 to happen, which is somewhere in between the rapid explosion and the long grind. Johnny Morris decides to just buy it from you, and he offers you a couple $1,000,000, and there's a little bird in your head saying, no, 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 because I can get this to $100 million. No, dude, you take the 2 million and you go white bass fishing for the rest of your life. Like, that's like, and then you live off of 5% interest at $80,000 a year, free and clear, and and you enjoy the Sac
I
River.
see.
That's
I
my
see what you're
option.
saying. I would put that in category 3 because that's rocket ship. That's me. Shit, but you might be able to afford one of those rocket ship tours. If I get that money. But
Well, I listen to a lot of podcasts about startups and success, and you hear these guys bragging about, like, I turned down 100 million so I could get 3 billion. I'd be like, brother, not a chance. Like, that's when the numbers matter too much to you. Like, I'm chasing freedom. Like, freedom is my ultimate, and that's why that John Goodman clip is seared in my brain, is because that I have a number, and the minute I get that number, I'll be teaching fly fishing on my pond for a living.
using the co-angler app, of course.
Yeah, you'll be able to afford a basement then.
Maybe I could be a paid influencer.
Good.
Oh, all right, guys. Man, we wish you the best of luck, John, and we'll have everything in the show notes. And if you got a bunch of subscribers after being with Bill Dance, buckle up. This is the driftwood.
Yeah, this is the rocket ship. Hold on, dude. That rocket ship is option 3 lifts off
I'm ready.
now. No, in all seriousness, dude, we've got a lot of resources we can help you with. The Missouri Outdoor Communicators, the Association of Great Lakes Outdoor Riders. You should be involved in that. Very happy to help get you on some other people's podcasts and spread the word. So pulling for a fellow Missourian.
That would be much.
Heck yeah, man. We wish you the best. Gear review coming up next. End of the podcast, the beginning of a gear review. Brandon, what are you reviewing for us today?
Another Bass Pro inspired purchase. I finally got on the Black Rifle coffee. I used to not spend a lot of money on coffee because I spent it on bourbon, and now I can reallocate those funds into high-priced coffee. So I've gotten a couple different bags of the Black Rifle. I like a dark, kind of rich roast, and this Beyond Black has been pretty awesome. Somebody else bought this Arabic Black Rifle coffee, the Freedom Roast, and it was a gift for me because I work for Retrieving Freedom. It's really good too. It's a medium roast, but I'm kind of partial to the Beyond Black. I like that real dark coast roast. But yeah, all in all, I'm pretty impressed. And you see the displays in every Bass Pro Shop that you go into, and they support a lot of things that I support, like veterans and guns and coffee. So it all works together. So if you've been hesitant on dropping the $15 for a bag of coffee, but you're on your way to becoming a coffee snob like me, maybe give it a try. Black Rifle Coffee.
Well, for mine, I was just out at American Outdoor Brands because their new factory outlet store is open. And that's my gear review. I mean, if you want to get some deals on a lot of American Outdoor Brands, like the rocking the Bubba hat. They got all the knives in the new factory outlet store. They got the Caldwell, the Bog, the Gorilla Grills. I mean, they finally came around and opened up the factory outlet. So it's a walk-in store open Wednesday through Saturday. You should take some time, run off Route Z off I-70. Go check it out. They got some great deals on some great products. And yeah, the factory outlet is now open at American Outdoor Brands.
We'll see you down the trail.